Hello, thanks for tuning in. My name's Stuart, the Unrepentant Atheist, and today's video is going to be about confirmation bias. Prophecies in both the Bible and the Quran and the Hadith. Why does it seem to be that these prophecies only impress those who are already converted, who are already invested in those religions? Why do we never hear about atheists converting because Muhammad predicted this and it came true, or because it was predicted in the Bible that there would be a state of Israel and that came true? Why is it that we don't see atheists converting to religions because these predictions are supposedly coming true or are coming true? And why is it that only those who are already believing in the religion accept these as having any value whatsoever in terms of proving their religion? So quite recently, I asked a Muslim, prove to me that Islam is true, and what I got back was the prophecy that was recorded in the Hadith that Muhammad supposedly made, that Arabia, the peninsula of Arabia, will once again become green. Now, I've got the actual translation here in English, so let's just have a look at it just to see what it says. Here we are. Abu Huraira reported, the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him, said, "The owl will not be established until wealth is so abundant and overflowing that a man will go out with his wealth to give alms but not find anyone who accepts it from him, and until rivers and meadows return to the land of Arabia." Okay, so as we know, Arabia or Saudi Arabia, that part of the Middle East, is very dry. It remains dry except for a certain portion of land which has been developed for agriculture. Obviously, in Saudi Arabia, they understand oil won't last forever, and they're looking for other ways of actually having a sustainable economy. And credit to them, they've tapped into underground sources of water and they're irrigating their land extremely well, but it's still relatively small part of Saudi Arabia has actually been developed. This has excited a lot of Muslims to say that peace and blessings be upon Allah, the prophecy of Muhammad is coming true, that the meadows and rivers are indeed returning to Saudi Arabia. The only problem with this, of course, is that it's been done artificially, and secondly, there are still no permanent rivers in Saudi Arabia, so it's not really happening to any great extent. It's been done artificially. To be fair, though, I've gone a bit further in my research. There's a Muslim scholar. Let me just see if I can find. There's a Muslim scholar on ResearchGate, and what he's actually found, he has actually analyzed the science, and he's found that in 25 million years, okay, I'll just read it out. The geological approach estimates that Arabia will turn green again in approximately 25 million years. Yeah, so he's saying the possibility of Arabia turning green in the future is indeed true, in line with the statements of the Prophet's Hadith. So he is acknowledging that it's not really happening now. It's happening artificially in a very, very small way, but that in 25 million years, it will actually be happening in quite a big way. Well, of course, if you go 25 million years back in time, I think the land which is now Great Britain was stuck in a great ice age, or has been in an ice age, obviously in the distant past, and climates do indeed change. The question is, okay, well, first of all, on the Hadith, a lot of Muslims don't accept the Hadith because it's not the Quran. There are Quranists who just reject the Hadith out of hand. If these prophecies were so amazing and proved Islam to such an extent, I would have thought that they would be accepting them, but no, not all Muslims accept the Hadith. So the Hadith is like a collection of from the oral tradition, and maybe some writings which were collected later on and put together generations and generations after Muhammad's death. So we don't even know that Muhammad actually said these things. And if the claim is that Allah must have been providing this information to whoever wrote this down, then clearly Allah was not just communicating with Muhammad, he was also communicating with people that came after him, which I would think would in fact be blasphemy to any Muslim. So we don't know that Muhammad actually said this. It's simply being reported in the same way that we have many Christian texts, the Gospel of Thomas, for example, which are rejected out of hand by the Roman Catholic Church and not included in the canon, yet have got unique sayings in them attributed to Jesus. And obviously, we don't know in Christianity whether with any degree of accuracy what's been attributed to Jesus was actually said by Jesus. And in the same way, frankly, we don't know whether Muhammad said any of these things at all, either in the Quran or in the Hadith. So, but what's typically done is that we get a burden, we get a switching of the burden of proof. Yeah. So, switching of the burden of proof. So typically what will happen is a Muslim will come to me and say, how could somebody 1400 years ago have actually known this? Well, okay, first of all, it's not 1400 years ago because the hadith was written later, so it's less than that, but that's a quibble. So how could somebody from those times have known that Arabia was once green, as geology seems to have discovered? Fossils have been discovered there, and it seems that there was a big shift in the climate, that it became dry. And there are cycles. It's dry, then it's green. It's dry, then it's green. Over millions of years, we know that there are climate shifts all over the world, not just in that part of the world. But how could anybody in those times have known that this was actually the case? Well, they didn't know. They didn't know. The claim is that Allah fed them this information. Okay, well, the onus is on you. You're making the claim. The onus is on you to prove that, and that it wasn't just guesswork, or it wasn't some kind of poetic statement, which we've often seen in literature or in history. We've got this rhetoric where we were once a great people. He could be speaking metaphorically. We were once a great people. We lived in the land of milk and honey, in the land of greenery and meadows and rivers and of great riches. We were once a great people. We're now living in this dry, arid desert land where life is really tough. But times will improve, and these lands will be green and rich once again. It's a very poetic kind of way of speaking, and I couldn't rule it out that whoever wrote that down in the hadith thought, oh, this sounds quite poetic, this sounds quite good. Yeah, this will inspire people forward. This will inspire people to believe in the religion and to improve the fortunes of Muslim peoples. Now, that's another point. One thing I'd like to get at. If Allah favors Muslims, if Allah is working for Muslims, why has the Islamic world failed so horribly and degenerated to such a high extent, to such a catastrophic extent, from the place that it was in over 1,000 years ago, when admittedly they had scholars and there was some kind of progress? But then they went into the Dark Ages, and they're still stuck in the Dark Ages. They considered themselves to be superior to the Western powers, to the Christian nations. And then eventually technology overtook them. They were being defeated in wars. They were having to buy guns, etc. And there was virtually no technological progress in the Islamic world for 1,000 years, and any technological progress that occurred in the Islamic world was imported from the Western powers. So if Islam is true, why are the Arab peoples even now subordinate to the Western world to a large extent? There's very little, apart from oil wealth, there's very little coming out of the Arabic world. One would expect that they would be on top, not us, not the secular nations, not the sort of Christian nations. So it doesn't really make any sense. Coming back to the hadith, it doesn't make any sense that if Islam is true, basically, that the Islamic world would have done so spectacularly badly in comparison with the Western world. That doesn't really make any sense whatsoever. Okay, So nothing. If you're going to say that this is a prophecy and wow, Islam must be true because Muhammad couldn't have known this, then you're going to have to explain why are there so many scientific errors in the Hadith and the Quran. Just to give a couple of examples, and I've got to get going with this because my recording time is going to finish. So yeah, just to give a couple of examples. Okay, so first of all, in the Hadith, they got embryology wrong. Okay, so they said in the Hadith, the embryo spends 40 days as a drop of sperm, 40 days as a clot, and then 40 days as a piece of flesh. Okay, well, we know that's not true. So if the Hadith has got this amazing information from Allah that Arabia was once green, you couldn't have known that, and it's going to become green again, well, you couldn't have known that either. Why is it that they can't get basic biology right? That doesn't really make any sense. You can't count the hits and ignore the misses. There are dozens of these examples of getting things wrong. And then coming to astronomy in the Quran, there's this big thing about geocentrism, that the sun rotates around the earth. So there are many surahs where this is actually referred to, that the sun is actually running around and coming to a resting place. And it's talked about in the same kind of way that the moon. So the moon and the sun are both generating their own light. The moon is generating its own light. We know this not to be true, but it's not a heliocentric scheme which was believed in. They believed that the earth was in the middle and that the sun was going around. I'm not going to read out all of the quotations. I'm going to put links to all the scientific and all the scientific errors in the Quran and the Hadith. So you've got this one vague prediction. And by the way, it's not universally accepted that this has been translated correctly. Some scholars are saying that the word reverts actually, or returns, should actually just be translated as turns to, not returns to. So there are some Muslim scholars who don't agree with this, who say it's not a prophecy. Okay, so, but even if it is, even if that's a correct translation, you can't prove that this came from Allah. The onus is on you to prove that this came from Allah. The onus is not on me to prove that it couldn't have come from a divine source or from a natural source. And you haven't done that. I've suggested that there are other explanations, a poetic reading, or just a lucky guess. If you write down thousands of things, some of them are going to come true. If you write down thousands of prophecies, some will come true. Most of them won't. And if one prophecy seems to have come true, you can retrospectively look back and say, oh yeah, he got that right. And, that's going to happen. So, oh yeah, prostrate yourself before Allah, because the Muhammad spoke, the Prophet spoke the truth. He got this information from a divine source, from Allah. Islam is true. No, because you've got to account for why there are so many scientific errors in both of those texts, the Hadith and the Quran. If Islam was true, there would be no scientific errors. Everything would be absolutely correct. You can dance around and say, oh, well, the people weren't ready to know those truths at the time, but there are so many, there's such a tide of errors that you can't claim that this came from a divine source, from a all-powerful, all-knowing being who knows exactly what all the science is. These texts would not be littered with so many errors, because when the errors are discovered, it would hurt people's faith. Oddly enough, it doesn't, because Muslims and Christians and Jews count the hits and they ignore the misses. It's confirmation bias. And that's why me, as an atheist, I'm not impressed with any of these prophecies at all. The prophecy would have to be far more specific. It would have to be very, very specific for me to actually accept it. And the prophecies are just too vague. And even if they were specific, I would still be looking for a naturalistic explanation. Okay, thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed this video. And remember, if you're making a claim that something must have come from a divine source, it's not for me to falsify that. You've got to prove that that is the case. Okay, bye for now.